Imagine a world where Fëanor, the most gifted yet fiery of the Noldor, made a choice that would echo through the ages, not to stand defiantly against Morgoth, but to ally with him. Let us embark on this alternate path, exploring the unthinkable and delving into its implications for Middle-earth. It is the year of the trees, 1495, an era before the sun and moon. The great lights of Lorelin and Telperion still bathe Valinor in their golden and silver radiance. It is here that Fëanor's genius reaches its zenith, crafting the Silmarils, the most wondrous jewels ever created. But when Morgoth, the Dark Valar, sees the Silmarils, he covets them fiercely. His lust for the jewels sets the stage for a confrontation of epic proportions. In the canon tale, Morgoth's deceit leads to a theft that scars Fëanor's soul, igniting his rebellion against the Valar. But what if, instead of pursuing vengeance alone, Fëanor saw Morgoth's power as a means to his own ends? What if, in his anger and ambition, he believed that allying with Morgoth would grant him dominion not only over the Silmarils, but over all of Arda? Such a partnership, no matter how improbable, would have profound consequences, not just for the Noldor, but for the destiny of Middle-earth. To understand the stakes, we must first explore Fëanor's character and the seeds of his potential alignment with Morgoth. Fëanor was no ordinary elf. Born in 1169 of the Years of the Trees, his mind burned with creativity, unmatched by any other in Valinor. He forged the Silmarils, infused with the light of the two trees, and imbued with his very essence. Yet, this same brilliance was shadowed by flaws, pride, possessiveness, and an unrelenting temper. Morgoth, ever the master of manipulation, exploited these weaknesses. During his imprisonment in Valinor, he sowed whispers of doubt and rivalry among the Noldor, particularly between Fëanor and his half-brothers. It's not inconceivable that, in an alternate timeline, these seeds bore darker fruit. Fëanor's resentment toward the Valar, whom he saw as tyrants seeking to control his creations, might have driven him to view Morgoth as an ally, someone who, like him, desired to shape the world according to his own will. This alliance would likely begin in deceit, for Morgoth's promises of shared dominion were never sincere. But for Fëanor, consumed by his desire to reclaim the Silmarils and assert his greatness, such a partnership might have seemed a necessary gamble. In this alternate timeline, Morgoth approaches Fëanor not with open hostility, but with a cunning offer. Instead of stealing the Silmarils outright, he plays upon Fëanor's deepest insecurities, presenting himself as a kindred spirit. Morgoth claims to admire Fëanor's brilliance, suggesting they share a disdain for the limitations imposed by the Valar. Together, he argues, they could rule Arda, unshackled by the constraints of the so-called Guardian. The pivotal moment likely occurs in 1495 of the Years of the Trees. This is when, in the canon story, Morgoth and Ungoliant destroy the two trees and flee with the Silmarils. But in this new reality, Morgoth persuades Fëanor before the tree's destruction. Instead of stealing the jewels, he convinces Fëanor to hand them over willingly, promising their combined power will raise the Noldor above all others. Fëanor's ambition and distrust of the Valar could make this offer irresistible. He might rationalize that an alliance with Morgoth is temporary, a means to an end. However, in choosing Morgoth, Fëanor would cross a line that the Valar and his kin would consider unforgivable. The news of Fëanor's pact with Morgoth would shock Valinor. The Valar, seeing this as a betrayal of their trust, would likely denounce Fëanor and the Noldor who followed him. In canon, Fëanor's fiery words and the Oath of the Silmarils already divided the Noldor. But here, his alignment with Morgoth would deepen the rift into outright civil war. Fingolfin, ever the voice of reason, might lead the faction opposing Fëanor, condemning the alliance as an act of madness. This could trigger a violent conflict among the Noldor in Aman, with kinslaying occurring even before the tragic events at Al Qualon. Meanwhile, Morgoth, ever opportunistic, would use this division to his advantage. With Fëanor as an ally, Morgoth could consolidate his power in Middle-earth far earlier than in canon. Instead of retreating to Angband after fleeing Valinor, Morgoth might seize this moment to establish dominion over Beleriand, with Fëanor by his side. And, the story goes, the Valinor campaign might have completed itself. The destruction of the two trees, a cataclysmic event, would take on a new dimension. Instead of Morgoth and Ungoliant acting alone, Fëanor might join them, believing that the tree's light was no longer needed now that the Silmarils contained it. This act would forever sever any chance of reconciliation with the Valar or his kin. But such an alliance would not be without tension. Morgoth's true intentions would inevitably surface, as his lust for domination could not tolerate sharing power. Fëanor, proud and unyielding, would resist becoming a mere pawn. Their partnership would teeter on the brink of betrayal from the start, each waiting for the opportune moment to strike. If Fëanor allied with Morgoth, the course of the Wars of Beleriand would change drastically. By the Year of the Trees, 1497, Morgoth would likely march into Middle-earth not as a fugitive but as a conqueror, with Fëanor and his followers as a powerful vanguard. Together they could establish dominion over vast territories before the rising of the sun and moon in Year 1 of the First Age. The First Battle of Beleriand, canonically fought between Morgoth's forces and the Sindar under Thingol, would take on a far grimmer tone. In this alternate timeline, Fëanor's Noldor might lead the assault, their superior weaponry overwhelming Thingol's armies. The peaceful splendor of Doriath might fall, its girdle of Melian unable to withstand such a combined force. This collaboration could mark the beginning of an age where the beauty of the elves is wielded in service of destruction. Fëanor's craftsmanship, his unmatched ability to forge weapons and devices of power, might empower Morgoth's armies with a strength unparalleled in canon. Orcs bearing arms of Noldorin design, siege engines fueled by Fëanor's brilliance, such a war machine would crush resistance swiftly. Fëanor's oath, sworn with his sons, remains central to his story. Even allied with Morgoth, this vow to reclaim the Silmarils at any cost would still drive his actions. But in this alternate scenario, the oath becomes a sword dangling over their alliance. Morgoth's intent was always to hoard the Silmarils, not to share them. Over time, Fëanor would grow increasingly disillusioned, realizing that Morgoth had no intention of fulfilling his promises. This betrayal would ignite conflict between the two. However, by the time Fëanor turns against Morgoth, it might be too late. If Fëanor were to challenge Morgoth directly, his defiance could still lead to his death. Canonically, Fëanor perishes in 1497 of the Years of the Trees, battling Morgoth's Balrogs near Angband. In this alternate tale, a similar fate might befall him, but the circumstances would carry far greater tragedy. He would die not as a defiant hero, but as a fallen figure consumed by his own hubris. His alliance with Morgoth leaving Middle-earth in greater ruin. The prophecy of the North, declared by Mandos, foretold the suffering and exile of the Noldor. In canon, this prophecy is delivered after Fëanor and his kin defy the Valar and slay the Teleri at Alqualonde. In this alternate version, Fëanor's pact with Morgoth would only deepen the curse's severity. The doom might proclaim not only exile but the eventual downfall of the Noldor as a people. Their once great name would become synonymous with betrayal, and their legacy would be forever tainted by their association with Morgoth. This darker iteration of the Noldor would lack the moral redemption sought by characters like Galadriel, Elrond, and Fingon in canon. The introduction of men in the First Age, around the year 310 of the First Age, canonically marks a turning point in the history of Middle-earth. In this alternate timeline, The arrival of men would intersect with a world already reshaped by the alliance between Fëanor and Morgoth. Rather than being welcomed as allies and students by the Noldor, men might instead be seen as pawns or slaves. Morgoth, ever manipulative, could exploit their mortality, offering false promises of power or immortality. Under his influence, and perhaps with Fëanor's weapons and guidance, men might be coerced into serving Morgoth's expanding dominion. This scenario would have dire consequences for the Edain, the faithful allies of the elves in canon. Figures like Beor and Hador might never rise to prominence, their people instead falling under the sway of Morgoth's corrupting influence. The noble houses of the Edain might never earn the blessings of the Valar, preventing the eventual rise of Númenor. Meanwhile, men who resisted Morgoth's rule would find themselves hunted, their lives a constant struggle for survival. Such a grim reality would leave an indelible mark on the destiny of Arda, with men failing to fulfill their role as Eru Ilúvatar's second-born and inheritors of the world. The fate of the Silmarils would remain central to this darker history. In canon, the Silmarils become symbols of both hope and tragedy, driving the actions of characters like Beren, Luthien, and Eärendil. In this alternate timeline, their fate would grow even darker. If Morgoth managed to retain possession of the Silmarils through his alliance with Fëanor, their corrupting influence might spread unchecked. The jewels, radiating the pure light of the two trees, could become instruments of domination, used to enslave both elves and men. Fëanor, whose obsession with the Silmarils defines his story, might descend further into madness, consumed by his inability to reclaim what he freely gave to Morgoth. Should this alliance fracture, as all alliances with Morgoth inevitably do, the resulting conflict would likely bring devastation on a scale unmatched in canon. The Nirnaeth Arnodiad, the battle of unnumbered tears, might see Fëanor's remaining sons leading armies against their father's former ally. Such a betrayal would only deepen the tragedy of the Noldor, their once great legacy reduced to infighting and ruin. In canon, the Valar intervene at the end of the First Age, bringing about Morgoth's downfall in the War of Wrath. But in this timeline, the War of Wrath would face a much stronger Morgoth, bolstered by the might of Fëanor's craftsmanship and the unity of his dark armies. The Valar might hesitate longer to act, fearing the sheer strength of Morgoth's forces. When they finally do intervene, the resulting war could devastate Middle-earth entirely, leaving it scarred beyond recognition. Even if Morgoth is ultimately overthrown, the cost of victory would be staggering. Fëanor's ultimate fate in this timeline is uncertain. He might fall in battle against Morgoth, his ambition undone by the very darkness he once embraced. Alternatively, he could survive, only to be judged by the Valar for his role in plunging the world into chaos. Either way, his name would forever be associated with betrayal, his deeds casting a long shadow over the ages to come. In this alternate history, Fëanor's choice to ally with Morgoth transforms him from a tragic hero to a symbol of hubris and folly. His brilliance, once a beacon of hope, becomes a weapon of darkness, shaping a world where light struggles to endure. This tale serves as a grim reminder of Tolkien's central themes: the peril of pride, the corrupting power of ambition, and the inevitability of conflict when trust is betrayed. While the canonical story of Fëanor is one of defiance and downfall, this alternate path shows how even the brightest light can be twisted by the shadows of desire. What other aspects of this scenario would you like to explore? Perhaps the impact on specific characters like Galadriel, or the long-term effects on the Second and Third Ages?